Hi, everyone. It's great to, be with you all on this Friday morning. I was looking at the chat at all the different places that people are hailing from. So it's great to have such a nice representation of different folks in kind of different types of professions and from all areas of the state. So I'm really glad to be here with everyone. Travis gave me a nice introduction, which I appreciate. So our center, about 6 months ago or so, we did a training on the circle of influence activity that I'm going to be talking with you all about today as a part of our Well at Work grant. And I was really, I was really glad to kind of have the opportunity to talk with folks about it further this morning. So yes, we're going to be talking about the circle of influence. It is an active coping tool. And so as part of this webinar, even though I can't hear you all and I can't see you, Travis already spoke about the chat. I do hope that folks will feel free to comment and ask questions in the chat, and he'll help me monitor that. I will be asking you guys to engage in this activity. It's probably going to be about 20 minutes or 25 minutes into the presentation. And so what I'd like folks to do is to go ahead and get a piece of paper and a pen ready. So kind of best circumstances, you have a piece of paper where you have two sides of it, but obviously use whatever you have handy. So in terms of our objectives for today, I'm hoping to help everyone be able to distinguish by the time we're finished with today between active and passive coping behaviors. And we're also like for folks to be able to apply the circle of influence activity to their practice. So in terms of our agenda today, I'm going to start with talking about active coping, kind of introducing what that is. Then I'm going to talk some and demonstrate the circle of influence activity. As I mentioned, we're going to have some time for folks to do some individual practice, and then we'll end the day with talking about how to put it into practice. And then, of course, we'll have some time at the end for us to answer questions and so forth. So let's start talking with, since we're going to be talking about coping today, let's talk a little bit about stress first. We're all very familiar with stress. We know that it's a physical, mental, or emotional strain or tension. We know that it's a feeling or condition that can occur when someone perceives that the demands around them are kind of exceeding their kind of resources at that point to cope. We all experience stress from time to time. And of course, there's lots of different types of stress. We may have stress because there's something kind of that's very unpleasant or something that's more negative in nature. But we know that we can also have stress a lot of times when things are really positive, when we have something that we're looking forward to as well. And stress, especially when it's chronic, can certainly carry a lot of physical and mental health needs. So what we'd like to talk about, like some examples of stress, just to kind of talk about that a bit, is that routine stress can certainly be related to things such as school or work or family or other types of daily responsibilities that we may have. We can also have stress that's brought on by more of a sudden change, such as losing a job or divorce or an illness that occurs. And I want to really speak to, all of us in the last 3 years have been going through this pandemic, and providers from all across the state working in all kinds of different areas are really experiencing high levels of need for services with a very high complexity of cases, and folks are really navigating a lot of very complicated and often intertwined systems. And of course, with this work comes a lot of work-related stress, as well as risk for development of secondary traumatic stress for some folks doing certain types of work in our workforce. And of course, we know that the addiction and overdose rates in Kentucky and across our nation have really skyrocketed. And there's been this really increased need to address not only substance abuse related, but also general mental health needs. So alongside with mental and physiological consequences of chronic stress, stress also certainly affects the way that we can think through problems and figure out solutions. I know I'm not the only one who experiences, when I am feeling more stressed about something, my ability to kind of think clearly and think about my options and what aspects of the situation I may be able to really kind of influence is much, much harder. And I know, as I said, I'm not the only one who experiences that. So what we're going to be talking about today, as I've said, is this active coping strategy called the circle of influence. And I hope that this is going to be a helpful tool for folks to use going forward. So what is active coping? So coping in general, a kind of a very general definition of that, is that it's defined as an attempt to overcome a problem or a difficulty. What I mean by active coping is that it is a conscious decision to engage with a problem or a situation. It isn't passive, meaning we're not engaging in coping strategies such as denial or distracting ourselves from thinking about or interacting with the problem or engaging in emotional detachment. Those are all aspects of more passive coping. When we're using active coping, we're leaning into the problem. We're engaging with it in a way that allows us to be proactive as opposed to reactive. And because of this, we're able to more quickly adapt to new situations and meet challenges. Active coping is typically requires an ability to be self-reflective. We have to be able to take a step back from what we're thinking and how we're feeling, and to be able to honestly examine our choices and our behaviors. Additionally, active coping is a coping style that can lessen stress and increase a sense of well-being. And I'll talk a little bit about the research around that in just a moment. So some examples of active coping might be seeking out consultation from a colleague to gain a different perspective. Let's say you're having a really tough situation during the day, perhaps with a student or with a client or with a colleague. And so instead of ignoring it or kind of pushing it to the side, actively seeking out consultation to try to gain another person's thoughts or a perspective about it is an example of active coping. Another example is scheduling time with a friend when you're feeling lonely. Again, it's this act of kind of leaning into it and saying, this is what's going on for me. What can I do about this to change the situation or how I'm feeling about it? Yet another example is about journaling. So putting down your feelings. Maybe you're feeling anxious about something or really very sad or worried or confused about something. So journaling to better understand your feelings and understand the causes of those feelings is another example of active coping. So there's a lot of benefits of active coping. The research is pretty robust around this. The first one I want to talk about is that there's been some solid findings around active coping and decreased anxiety. This ability when we're engaging in active coping to help decrease worry. Better mental health has been found. So people who have been using active coping compared to those who are not, reporting just better overall mental health for themselves. Active coping has also been associated with perspective changing, this ability to kind of change the way that we may be thinking about a problem, which can often put us in a position to feel more able to kind of tackle it and solve it. Another benefit of active coping is increased problem solving, which is, this ability to maybe think about it in some different ways, to pull it apart, look at it from different angles. Increased well-being has also been found to be associated with active coping. as well as persistence, this ability to hang in there. Certainly we know, especially for stressors that we may engage in at work or in our personal lives, being able to hang in there when something gets difficult and be able to think about, okay, this is a very complex problem. What is it that I need to do? But to be able to hang in there and do that has been associated with use of active coping, as well as meaning making and an increased feeling of hope. So this change in perspective that people can experience, or kind of a different way of looking at a problem and being reflective about what's going on, can help us create meaning in a way that may help us increase feelings of hopefulness, even when we're in the throes of dealing with something that is more complex. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time particularly talking about active coping and self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is this coping self-efficacy is a person's belief that they can deal with a problem or stressor. And it makes sense, right? That if we feel that we're able to cope with difficulties around us, that is going to be beneficial to our health and, decrease anxiety and other potential negative consequences of managing stress. Really importantly, self-efficacy has been found to be an important determinant of health. It is something that when people have it, it tends to be a protective factor. Importantly, also active coping has been associated with increased self-efficacy. So again, kind of reinforcing this use of this active coping style. And then, of course, its self-efficacy is a predictor of positive health behaviors. So the study had found that individuals who were using active coping skills were more likely to identify that they were engaging in positive health behaviors. So as I said, the research is pretty robust in terms of supporting the use of active coping. So let's talk about what the circle of influence is. So the circle of influence is an activity that involves this reflection on problems that is across 3 nested circles. So you can see on the upper right of the slide that we've got the circle of concern that's in blue, the circle of influence in green, and then the circle of control that is in the center in yellow. So the circle of concern is the circle that represents aspects of our lives that may be causing us stress or anxiety or frustration or other feelings of distress that we feel that we don't have control of. So things that are going on in our lives that are of concern to us. The circle of control, that inner circle in yellow, represents the things going on in our lives that we feel that we have control over currently. And then we've got this middle circle. It's called the circle of influence in green. And that represents the things in our lives over which we may have influence. We may not be able to fully control the things that are in that circle of influence, but there are aspects of that we do have some agency over. So the circle of influence exercise was developed by Stephen Covey. Many of you have probably heard of him and also read his very popular book that was written, I think, in the late 90s called The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. So he created this activity to help people focus on being more proactive rather than reactive to problems, and really helping people be able to shift their thinking to a more proactive stance. So what the circle of influence activity can do is that it helps us increase the sense of self-efficacy that I've talked about by helping us engage in self-reflection and take responsibility for our thoughts and our feelings and actions. It can help us break down complex problems and examine them from very different perspectives. And it also helps us think about aspects of that problem that we may be able to have influence over. So for example, how we may be able to work with others towards a goal, or ways of communicating our ideas and abilities that may join with the good work that others are doing around us. So really importantly, being able to influence things around us, whether it's in our work or in our personal lives, is an active coping strategy. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and demonstrate this activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a fictional colleague named Brenda, and I'm basically going to walk through how I would engage her in this. And then, as I said, we're going to practice this together in a few moments. So the first thing I'm going to ask Brenda to do is I'm going to ask her to fold a piece of paper in half. I usually ask that folks are using at least like just a regular 8 by 11 piece of paper, but they can use something bigger if they would like, or something smaller if that's the only thing available. And I'm going to ask her to kind of draw a line in half, or fold it in half, but in some way kind of demarcate the two different sides. And the next thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to ask her to go ahead and identify on the right side of the page a good day, just to write good day on top of it. And then on the left side, I want her to write the bad day on top of it. Now what I'm going to ask her to do is I'm going to ask her to draw 3 things from a good day and 3 things from a bad day. Now, lots of times this causes some anxiety because folks think, oh, I'm not very good at art. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're good at art. It doesn't matter how you draw it. You want to use as few words as possible. I think there's the power of kind of drawing kind of the pictures of it that is being captured here. So you just want to draw the best you can. So what we find is that Brenda, on her bad day, she's drawing herself as being isolated from others. She's also drawing herself feeling really over her head at her job, really feeling like she's drowning. We also see her worrying about getting sick and missing school and not having time to help with her children's schooling. For her good day, what we see that she's drawing is herself finishing a project and feeling really good about that. We also see her taking a quick walk after lunch and being able to stay healthy and sitting down to dinner with her children at home. So now what I'm asking Brenda to kind of take a step back. I want her to really kind of look at themes that are coming out of these pictures that she's drawn. And what we notice in this example is that what's important to her is feeling connected with others, being helpful to others around her, whether that's her kids at home or whether that's people she's working with. Staying healthy is also important to her, as well as spending quality time with her kids. This step of taking a step back and being reflective about what is coming up in these drawings is really important because it's laying the groundwork for how she's going to be thinking about this as she's putting them on the circles. So the next thing I'm going to ask Brenda to do is to draw a big circle in the middle of her page. We want it to cover basically the whole of her circle. Or the whole of her paper, excuse me, and that is her circle of concern. The next thing I'm gonna have her do is to go ahead and draw the circle of control. So remember, the circle of concern is the aspect of the circle that represents aspects of her life that are concerning her, that are causing her stress and anxiety or frustration or other feelings of distress that she does not feel that she has control over. Then the circle of concern that's in the middle represents those things over which Brenda does feel that she has control over. And then next, we're gonna talk a little bit about how uncomfortable it feels to not be able to control things that are going on for us that are in our circle of concern. I know I'm not alone in that it causes a lot of anxiety and is really uncomfortable. So the next thing I ask her to do is to go ahead and draw that circle of influence right between the circle of concern and the circle of control. And I remind her that that circle of influence represents those things in her life that she has some influence over. So the next thing I do is I ask her to go ahead and identify 3 things from the bad day and 3 things from her good day. So typically what I ask folks to do, or how I do this when I'm doing it myself, is I put them on sticky notes so I can move them around. But it's okay if you don't have those, of course, to go ahead and just jot them down on the side of the paper or on, tear off pieces of paper just to be able to move those around. So what she has identified from her good day is the finishing the project, taking that walk after lunch, and having dinner with her children. And what she's identified for her bad day was feeling isolated from work and others, feeling really incompetent sometimes at what she's doing because she's feeling so underwater sometimes, and then not feeling like she's helping her kids. So those are all things that she identified from her drawings from the good and the bad day. So what we know, so then I go ahead and I ask her to go ahead and start placing these on within the circles that she feels that they need to go. So should we see her feeling isolated within her circle of concern, as well as feeling incompetent and not feeling that she's able to help her children as much as she wants to. We see her putting the finished product at work, her being able to place that in the circle of control, as well as being able to take a walk and being able to have dinner with her children on some nights. So we notice that primarily she's placed the things from her bad day within that circle of concern, which is not surprising, right? And so I ask her to really step back and think about in what way she may be able to take action more proactively about these issues. It's not a dichotomy. It's not about whether you have control over something or you don't. It's about being able to kind of open up your way of thinking about a problem to consider what you may be able to influence. Are there pieces of those things in that circle of concern that Brenda can influence in some way, shape, or form? So then she goes ahead and she starts moving them. We see that with feeling isolated, she can identify that she's able to move some of these pieces around. So feeling isolated, she can reach out to a friend, a colleague, that there are ways that she can kind of counteract that feeling of isolation. We also see that she's able to move feeling incompetent. There are ways that she identifies, okay, I can talk with my supervisor about, some of these feelings that I'm having. I can do some readings about this certain area that I feel like I don't know enough about. Or I can gain support and get feedback from some colleagues who are doing some work in this area where I'm not feeling as competent. And then lastly, we see her that she's able to move, not helping her children as much as she wants to. That on reflection, she's able to think about, maybe there are some ways that I am helping them that I'm not giving myself credit for. I am still taking the time every day to check in with them. I am helping them with their homework, etc. So again, asking her to shift in the way that she's thinking about that to help increase her feeling of control over that concern. So after she's moved all of these pieces around to the areas of the circles that she feels like they go, I ask her to kind of take another step back and again to reflect on her thinking about how these problems have shifted and how she is thinking about things differently. I ask her whether or not she notices that she's had more influence or control over things that maybe at the beginning of this exercise, she thought, oh my goodness, I don't have any control over those pieces. They're controlling me, is oftentimes what I hear people say. And did she notice the helpfulness of maybe focusing more on how she feels about something as opposed to the how and the what and the when? Sometimes when we focus on that emotional piece, we realize that there are ways that we may be influencing how we're feeling about it, or ways of getting some support about that, even if we can't solve the complexity of the larger problem. And then the last thing I ask her to think about is this idea that sometimes there are things that we just can't control. Like, I remember when I was doing this training during, we were in the kind of the heat of the COVID pandemic, and people had people did not have control over how things were coming down, right? We didn't have control over how we were having to work. We didn't have control over whether or not we were able to stay well. Sometimes there were aspects of that, maybe we could control some of that, but that people were getting sick, that COVID was a reality. So sometimes there are problems that we have that we may just need to park and just kind of acknowledge those. And even just being able to acknowledge that and saying, here are the things that I can influence, or these are things that I can control. But sometimes there is a problem or a piece of a problem that we may just need to park and just acknowledge that. And that's okay. And I think that that's really important as well. It's not about denying that problem's there or being emotionally detached from that problem, but it's really just recognizing that sometimes, and especially maybe it's just at a certain point in time, we may have very limited ability to influence something that is bothering us. All right. So I hope that explanation is helpful in kind of getting a first blush of what this activity is all about. And what I would like to do, and of course I wish I could see everyone, is I would like to have everyone go ahead and try this. So I'm going to kind of walk you guys through this activity, and I'm actually going to be doing it while we're doing it, so that I can help share some of my observations as well. Okay, so I'd like everyone to go ahead and get a piece of paper and have that ready, and a writing utensil. Remember, you're going to have kind of two sides of a piece of paper, or two separate pieces of paper. And I do encourage people to try this. I think it's a really great way of kind of reinforcing, kind of learning it and understanding it. Okay, so the first thing I'd like folks to do is let's just kind of take a moment to clear our brains for a second and reflect on our current stress level with work-related stress, though people can certainly utilize this when thinking about stress in their personal lives as well. Consider if your stress level is higher or lower than usual. There's things that are related to that stress that feel particularly overwhelming right now. And also maybe think about if there's certain things that you really do wish that you felt like you had more influence over. It's going to give folks just about 20 seconds to think about that. Okay, the next thing I want you to do is to go ahead and draw a line to create two sides on your piece of paper. And on the one side, you're going to write a good day. And on your other side, you're going to write a bad day. And as I said, I'm doing this with you so I can share some of my insights as well. And I want you to go ahead and draw. I'm going to give folks about 7 minutes to do this. I want you to go ahead and draw the things that make a good day and the things that make up a bad day, and aim to identify three different things for each part of that. Don't worry about the quality of the art. You don't have to share this or show this to anyone. You can share some of your insights about this, when we're finished with it, but you don't have to share your art, and try to use as few words as possible. Again, we're drawing 3 good things from our good day and three things from a bad day that represent those for us. Give folks just a little less than 2 minutes to finish that up. Just another minute before we move on. Okay, so now what I'd like folks to do is go ahead and turn your page over or start on a separate page, whichever you decided to do. And I want you to draw a big circle. So think about that big blue circle that is in the right hand of the PowerPoint slide. And basically let's make it as big as you can on the paper and write on there your circle of concern. Now, let's in the very middle, let's draw another circle. That's called our circle of control. And then we're going to put that circle of influence that's right in the middle of those two circles. So remember, that circle of concern are those things that are causing us distress, the things that we are concerned about. The circle of control are the things that we feel like we have control over. And then that circle of influence are the things that we feel like we have the ability to influence in some way, shape, or form. Now, what I'd like y'all to do is to go ahead and choose 3 things from your good day and 3 things from your bad day, and place them within your circles. You can just kind of write them in, or you can tear up a piece of paper so you can move them around on your page. I'm going to give people about 3 minutes to do this. Put them in the parts of the circle where you feel like they kind of immediately go, meaning like where you feel like they fit the best. We'll have a minute to reflect on them in a minute. Now I'd like everyone to kind of take a step back from where they put things on their diagram. And I want you to really think about if there's anything that's still in your circle of concern, what aspects of that you may be able to influence that may help you move it into that circle of influence. Even if it's just a little piece of that. Sometimes we can't control a larger issue, but there are certain aspects of that, of a problem or a stressor that we can influence, especially when it comes to us and our behaviors and how we think about it and feel about it. And try to work to see if you can move them as much as possible into the circles of influence or control. Also keeping in mind that there may be things that you just want to park that are not something you can influence at this time, maybe in the future, but that you just want to park it at that point. Okay, so I'd like to go ahead and kind of I'm going to open my chat, and I would love to hear from folks some reflections on doing this activity. You don't have to share what you drew or what you put into your circles, but if you want to share aspects of this experience for you, that would be really great. I know we're a big group, but I'm hoping that we can do some of that. So the first thing I want us to reflect on is noticing a shift in your stance from reactive to proactive. I see a comment from Kathy Hall about didn't think that I was stressed until I wrote it down. Yeah, that's funny how that is. Sometimes, we're pretty good, I think, compartmentalizing and moving forward with things. Absolutely. But did anyone notice a shift in your stance from reactive to proactive when thinking about a problem? One of the problems that I put in on my bad day was when I had a lot of computer problems. And so I felt like initially I did put that in my circle of concern, but was able to shift that to my circle of influence. It's just a reminder that I have a lot, I can influence some of that, even if I can't control the computer gremlins that sometimes take over my system. And then I see Heather's comment, feeling overwhelmed, but knowing I can prevent this by time management. That is such a good example. It's, when folks talk a lot about like productivity demands and just level of workload, and the work still has to get done, but there may be aspects of how we do that work or that we can influence. I see April's comment about loving the idea of parking something. Me too. I think there is empowerment that comes from that, and feelings of self-efficacy, which oftentimes that self-efficacy that goes along with being able to influence. Like sometimes we just have to acknowledge that something is maybe a problem we can't tackle at this moment. Yeah, showed conversations that I've been putting off. Yeah, grief over losing mom and moving it to influence because of support you're getting around that. Absolutely, such good examples. The next thing I wanted folks to reflect on is, did you experience any increased feeling of agency, this discovery that you have more influence than you thought? I'm going to read through the rest of them, and then I can see folks are continuing to respond in the chat. Noticing the helpfulness of focusing on emotions that are related to doing the work or whatever the problem may be, and not on the mechanics of how and what and when. That emotional piece, I said this earlier, but I'm going to repeat it, is so important, because that is what is when we can acknowledge and the emotions that we're having about something and the thoughts that we're having about it, that it does open the door for us to think about how we can influence what may help us feel better about that. And then other insights you may have about your work or yourself. And again, about this being okay just to park things that we can't influence or control. So there's I can see a lot of really good comments in the chat. This comment about amazing way of putting things in perspective, being productive or feeling productive are two different things for me, and still completing tasks, but not just as fast as I'd like. Absolutely. I have a job where there's always a to-do list. And if I only focused on finishing that to-do list, I think I would go crazy. But shifting how I can influence my feelings of, completion of, the list for the day or the week, or progress being made on projects and so forth, has been really powerful for me. Nothing in circle of concern, realizing I've influenced at least all of my stressors. Absolutely. Having control over something that's not the most important piece of this, right? That's not it. It is nice to have control over things. And I do hope that most people have something in their lives that they feel that they have control over, but influence is really powerful. Because we can only influence ourselves or control ourselves. Some concerns about missing kids, moving to Kentucky where the kids are living elsewhere, can make more plans to visit or talk every day. Great example. Journey, what helps me is the journey, my feelings and thoughts. I think you mean journaling, I think. I completely agree. Yeah. This permission to park concerns. I see comments about it being somewhat relaxing to be able to kind of write it down and kind of get a grasp on kind of what is in that circle of concern and being able to move some of those things to the circle of influence. Such good comments, you all. Actively involved in the result or situation of the day, and bad days were related to releasing control and blaming others for negatives. Boy, that could be really instilling lots of feelings of hope and positiveness to be able to let some of that go. So it sounds like folks were able to really kind of get some different perspectives from doing this. And it sounds like, as I hope, that this has been helpful for folks. We're going to talk for just a couple minutes. Thank you so much for folks who shared within the chat, and for everyone who participated in doing the activity, whether or not you put your thoughts in the chat or not. So let's talk a little bit about how we can use this. So I'm going to start with kind of this. We've been obviously practicing this in an individual way. All of us were creating this circle of concern for us individually. That is something I'm going to kind of combine the discussion about that with using it as needed. This is something that I honestly will pull out. I mean, sometimes it's once a week if I have a lot going on that week. Sometimes it's once a month, or sometimes it might be some time until I use it. But I actually have a sticky note that reminds me about it, that kind of prompts me to remember that, hey, you've got this tool. And when I tend to use it is when I notice that I'm feeling stressed, that my brain is having a hard time shutting off from things, or whatever the cue is to me. And then I just sit down and if I'm at my office and I have sticky notes and stuff to kind of put this on, to use to move the pieces to that from my good day and my bad day, then I'll do that. But if I don't, like I've said, I'll just tear off little pieces of paper, or I'll write them in and scratch them out and move them. It doesn't matter how pretty it is. It doesn't matter. But just being able to engage in that. And I almost honestly always walk away from it with some type of insight into kind of what I can actually influence. So that feeling of being over my head in responsibility or what have you feels so much more manageable for me. But let's talk about doing this as a group, because you could also do this as a group in like a treatment team or a staff meeting. And I would keep it very focused on work in that regard. And basically what you can do is you can have everyone kind of draw the good day and bad day at work, and then have a big circle of concern that you draw. Like our office has these big sticky notes that we'll use, that you can stick up on the walls. I guess Post-it notes is what they're called. And then everyone can kind of put their pieces onto circles of concern, or circles of influence, or circle of control. And then as a group, you can talk about, okay, what are the things that, oh my goodness, like these, I feel this way too. You can kind of see similarities between what kinds of things are in people's circles of concern. You can see where it might be a similar issue, but people are putting that in the circle of influence. So it opens the door to being able to talk about, oh my goodness, I hadn't thought about it that way, or this is that's a really great way of kind of intervening about that problem or what have you. And so it can become this really nice group process. It's not about griping about the work. It's about identifying the things that aren't feeling good or are really difficult or really challenging, really complex, and figuring out in what ways can we influence these. Sometimes there'll be insights of ways to influence it as a team, and sometimes it's going to be ways of influencing for people like individually. So it's a really great group process. And then you could also use it for supervision. If it is like for me, I'm a clinician. So in clinical supervision, if someone's coming to me and they're feeling really overwhelmed about kind of aspects of their job, that me as a supervisor, I have certainly asked folks to do this, and to, as a way of helping them be able to take the step back, be reflective about what is this that's really in my circle of concern right now, and what are the pieces that I can influence and control. It helps people identify areas that they may feel like they may need some more support. Or oftentimes what happens, and this is a really beautiful thing, is when they feel much more confident about the work that they're doing, that they actually have, wait a minute, I am, I can influence this. I am doing a good job in this area. So that's a really great thing to happen, but it's a very useful tool with supervision as well. Let's see, we have one more chat. Thank you for that comment. That's great. Okay, so I want to go ahead. Here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about this or what have you. We do have a podcast of, so on our website, our Center on Trauma and Children website at the University of Kentucky, in our Well at Work tab, we have a list of lots of different types of podcasts, and one of them is about the circle of influence. So if you ever want to have, I think it's about 5 minutes long, so if you ever want a refresher, that's an easy way to get that. So I see we have about 5 minutes left. I wanted to open if there was any questions or anything that I didn't answer, or any other observations that folks would like to share.
Dr. Eslinger, as we're waiting for the last questions and comments to come through, I'm going to go ahead and throw the link for the CEUs into the chat. Perfect. Just so everyone knows, you will receive a follow-up email later on today that has this link as well. So don't panic if the link gets buried in some comments that come through. We will make this available to everyone. I'm not seeing anything coming through right now.
Oh, well, thanks for the feedback. I hope this is something people can utilize, and I hope it, help, I don't know, kind of launches you on the rest of your Good Friday.
It definitely puts things in perspective. I noticed that on my bad day, everything on the side of my bad day had electricity running through it. It's a computer, it's a phone, and it was a clock. So it definitely helps with your perspective on what things are causing you stress and what you can do to kind of alleviate that. We've got a lot of comments coming through. Thank you. This is so helpful.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for participating so well.
It's a really great way of prioritizing things. And Dr. Eslinger, we really appreciate you being here today.
Thanks. I was glad to be here.
All right. At this time, I think I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.